Welcome back to Worth the Effort Woodworking, as today we are not woodworking. We're going to return to my teardrop project and we're going to wire us up a trailer. Now originally when I planned for this teardrop trailer, I was going to break apart all the segments, electrical, plumbing, frame and flooring, paneling, the interior, that kind of stuff, into separate videos. So the electrical was all going to be one video. But the more I did research on it, there is so little information out there on wiring up a simple utility trailer that I decided to break apart the trailer portion of the electrical into this video because I think it'll reach more people. It'll be a little bit more helpful. And then when I say that, there are a lot of videos out there if you type into how to rewire a trailer or wire a trailer. But basically all they're talking about is using the wires that are already on the trailer to fix things like lights or your junction box, that kind of stuff. They're not talking about starting with just a bunch of steel, which this is a trailer that I built, and I think a lot of people out there are in the same situation. So I'm not an expert here, but I've done some research and kind of figure out the way I want to do it. So hey, open up discussions in the comments on different ways somebody could do it so we could all learn together. I'm not an electrician, but I'm doing the best I can here. But this is going to be a total encompassing wiring project, which means we're starting with the tow vehicle because anything that's happening electrical starts here. So we've got to make sure that this thing's set up properly. And I think it's going to be the same situation for a lot of y'all out there, whether you're hauling a small utility trailer or like me, a teardrop. And what I mean by that is being able to hook your trailer to your vehicle, whether it's with a 4-pin or a 7-8 pin connection. And if you're going with trailer brakes, which I'm going to talk about in a second, hooking that up. Now, this is one of those situations where installing, lighting and trailer brakes sounds like a big deal, but it really isn't because of mass production. What I mean by that is in most cases, you're not having to rewire your vehicle for trailer lights. Even something that's kind of dedicated to utility, like this work truck that I have. Well, when I bought it, it did not come with a towing package or anything like that. It basically has a 4-wire plug around back that's just hooked to my brake lights. It's no big deal. Well, I want something a little bit more reliable, a little bit more professional, and something that will run a 7-pin connector so I can run trailer brakes on my trailer. And to do that one, I need to have a trailer brake controller. Now, because so many vehicles come with trailer brake controllers, they basically pre-wire vehicles like this, so I don't have to run anything out there. In fact, all I really need to do is install the switch, which has a little connector in back, and in this particular vehicle, that connector is sitting up there. For the simple reason, in mass production, it doesn't make sense for them to buy a wiring loom for a vehicle where half of them might have something, half of them don't. They just do the wiring so that all the accessories are available to anybody, and you just install the different parts because it's cheaper that way. And that's not something new. Back in 1986, I bought my very first new car, a Honda CRX, and back then, the accessories you would buy was an AC or a radio, and that was about it. They didn't come with that way, and because me in Texas, all I could really afford was the AC. So, I bought the car and drove it for a couple years with no radio. Then I went to the junkyard, picked up a Honda radio out of something totaled, pulled out the little thing, plugged it in because the wiring was over there, and the Honda even had speakers already in the doors, anticipating that most buyers would be installing a radio at the dealership. It's cheaper when you're mass producing something to do that kind of stuff in advance. So really all I have to do is install this right here, which is unique to my F150, but really all it's going to be is taking off the dash, putting it in, screwing it down, and plugging it into the back. The expensive part is I now then have to go to Ford and have the factory hook up the little computer to it to flick the little settings that engage trailer brakes. That's the hard part. Everything else is already done. I bring this up just because It really doesn't matter what vehicle you want to use as your tow vehicle, you can make it happen. In fact, that original CRX, I had a little lawn care business out there where I dragged around a 4x8 trailer behind that. And guess what? When I had to wire that thing up for lights, all the wires were already there. I just had to put on the connector. Now I'm going to show y'all how I do this one, knowing that most of y'all don't have a 2000 F150. It's just me using this as an example to show you how easy they make these kind of things for people to do. Along the way, might as well talk about why I think it's so important to install trailer brakes in any kind of trailer you're doing, especially if it's a lightweight trailer being towed with a light car. According to YouTube University, the only thing I'm going to need with this project is a 7mm wrench. So I just removed 2 7mm bolts. Drop that down in first gear, and this should just pull right off. Voila. Next is side piece right here, which has a coin slot and where I'm going to be installing the trailer brake controller. That coin slot is important because that's actually where other trucks, more expensive trucks, have a four-wheel drive connector. And I thought this was kind of funny. That just pops off. And because they pre-wire all these vehicles, no matter what they are, even though I've got a two-wheel drive truck, the selector for the four-wheel drive wiring is hooked into the coin slot. I assume they do that one just so it doesn't rattle. Next, I took out 2 more 7mm bolts to remove the little coin tray, and that's where my brake controller is going to be. Now I just need to fish around the wires, which I was told through YouTube University that they are just sitting here taped up against the wall, which they are. I'm just going to use scissors to cut the electrical tape that's holding it right next to the OBD, if anybody's interested in, or I think it's called the OBD. Pull that thing through, which it has a little cover to it. Pull that off. That would have taken me forever to figure out without YouTube University. And this plugs in right there. And I can now use those 2 bolts I took off for the coin box to secure that in. Now the thing about trailer brakes is it seems most people with a very, very light trailer, you know, 1,000, 2,000 pound, like a lot of these teardrops that are being built, well, they don't get brakes on their vehicle because they say it's so light. But the reason why you make a light vehicle is so you can tow it behind a lightweight car. And, you know, if you're towing something behind, you know, a cute ute or a small SUV that only has a towing capacity of a couple of thousand pounds, well, the things like the trailer has a capacity, even that lightweight, to move the vehicle. And the vehicle's own brakes are only designed to handle the weight of the vehicle and passengers, not an extra 1,000 pounds barreling down behind it, along with 2 wheels that with gyroscoping effect, they kind of magnify the weight that they are. I mean, the wheels want to keep rolling. That's just how it works out. So my feeling is having brakes on a trailer is more important on a lightweight trailer being towed by a super lightweight vehicle, because it takes the braking responsibility and puts it onto the trailer, not the vehicle itself. Plus the fact that, you know, a lot of new people start out with these lightweight trailers as a learning tool. Well, if you ever get in a situation where the trailer starts to sway, a trailer brake controller like this synchronizes your vehicle brakes with the trailer brakes, but it also gives you the ability to engage the trailer brakes by themselves. So if your trailer is starting to sway behind you, you can actually slow the trailer down and not your vehicle down, and it will snap that trailer back into control. So to me, this is just a safety issue. I would be scared to death towing a trailer without its own brakes. Now I need to hook up my four-wheel drive to my coin slotter, and then just pop this one back in. And pop this back in. Then reinstall these two bolts, knowing that I just spent, I think, $80 for that switch and saved myself, you know, buying it from the factory new. That was probably a $500 or $600 option. And having it installed after the fact would have been maybe twice that. Not a bad 10 minutes worth of work. Now I do still need to install one cheap fuse in my fuse box. There's instructions for that online, and go up to a dealership to have them change the settings. But anybody can do this style of work. You might not have this exact vehicle, but the work is about the same. And on this particular one, it literally took a 7mm wrench and a pair of scissors. Anybody can do it. So this little guy is supposed to go into 21. That's that right there. And then this big dude supposedly goes in number 9 slot. We're all set. Next step, I'm going to install the wiring harness to the back of the truck. And once again, I'm not taking the cheap route. I went and bought a Ford OEM rear wiring harness. Why? Because I wanted it to be simple. This thing looks complicated, but basically all I have to worry about is this one, and that's ground right there. There's literally a little socket above my spare tire where I just pull out the old 4-pin. I plug this one in. It even comes with little plastic inserts to anchor it up, and this plugs in to the back of the trailer plug. Really simple. All these other wires I don't have to worry about because they are for trucks with backup sensors. So I just zip tie those up out of the way. The only thing complicated is I have to figure out what bolts to use to put this on underneath my truck. I don't need to show you all how to do this. This is really super simple. Anybody can do it, even you. This sucks. So if you're like me and you actually built your trailer, welded up your trailer, get all the welding done on the areas you're going to be attaching wires, because you don't want to weld there after the fact in case you burn through the wires and just kind of waste all your effort. Now this is the elements that I'm going to be putting into that trailer to wire it up. Obviously I have a plug. I'm going to be going with the 7-wire right here. One of the different things I'm going to do that I've seen from a lot of other people that have wired up trailers is I'm actually going to wire it into a box. So all these wires are going to hook up into a separate box, and then all my trailer wires will hook up there. That way I can kind of separate my trailer from this wiring harness in case I need to test anything in the future. Running the wires, I'm going to be using this split tubing. They call it split flex tubing. I'll be running the wires inside this to protect it from vibration and abrasion in the future. I'm not 100% sure this is necessary, but it's very cheap. I bought these at the Blue Big Box store. A 7-foot section was $3. Obviously, I'll probably be using some zip ties, some lined stainless steel, because I don't want them to rust, with a rubber liner so it won't be abrading, to hold these channels to the frame. And that's actually something I haven't seen a lot of people doing or explaining in their videos out there. And I'm just using over-the-counter standard things. That way, my thinking is if these ever break, I can find a replacement just about everywhere. I did go by the trailer place, and he told me that in my state, I have to have orange light-up reflectors at the front of the trailer. So I did pick up some of those and got them painted, just cheap ones. They were $7 each. I was under the assumption that I could just use an orange reflection, just a sticker, but he said they needed to light up in Texas. And the one different thing I'm doing, because this is eventually going to be a teardrop camper, is I have one of these 7 wires cables. It's just a extra 12-volt cable that I can use to power stuff in the camper. And I'm going to be hooking up to a battery, that kind of stuff. But I don't want that to be draining my truck battery all the time. So I have one switch that I'm going to connect after the junction box going to my trailer so I can turn off that AC wire. So no power can come from my truck when it's in the off position. And that's something I'm doing different than everybody else. For the wire connectors, I just bought some crimp wires with some heat shrink on top of that to make it waterproof. So let's start laying stuff out. Now I'm getting started by installing all the hardware. Here are a few key things that you might want to think about. These lights, the taillights I got, one of them has a clear lens on that one. That's for your license plate, because in most states you have to have your license plate lit up for night viewing. Now that is run off of the running lights, and I am going to be installing a license plate temporarily right here, so that's lit up, so I'm legal. But eventually on my teardrop trailer, I'm going to be putting it on the back hatch, which means I need to run my wiring to accommodate for an extra running light wire going to that back hatch. So I have to incorporate that in my thoughts. These generic brake lights also have a little reflector on the side that would take care of my side red light to making me legal. But some things you might want to consider. Is these cheap kind of things are exposed to weather and vibration and stuff like that. So I don't want them to loosen up. So I'm going to be installing just a tad bit of blue Loctite at the base to hopefully take care of the vibration problem. I'm then going to paint them so that it should help out with the rust. Next up, I'm going to be installing the electrical box on the inside of the rails, and here are a couple tips. Basically, if I ever have to line up like holes and I have to be perfect, I'll actually put blue tape on them and then use that to lay out the marks. So I made 2 little punches in these holes right here. I can then put the blue tape down, get it aligned just the way I want, and then to start the holes in metal, I'm going to start with a punch. And this is just going to dent the metal. And I know this is a spring one, but it's busted. And that'll give me my 2 reference points. I forgot to turn on the camera, but basically I've drilled one small hole right where that divot was, and that divot prevented the drill bit from wandering. And then I'm basically working my way up to this 5/16 hole for this bolt, which is going to hold the wiring box on. And that's that. Now just to bolt it up, and be sure everybody goes over your bolts with spray paint just to prevent rusting. Now the reason why I chose that spot for the box is because of the length of the cable I got. This is My trailer is a bit unusual in that I've got a removable tongue. I have a long one in case I put a lot of weight on that triangle right there. I can extend it out to reduce the weight on my trailer hitch. And I have a short one for a little bit more maneuverability. So this is the long one. And you know, you have your trailer hitch and you want, you know, about arm's length from the trailer ball to wherever you're plugging in. So there's a little bit of flexibility as you turn. And then if you take this out here, that's what gives me my box placement. So to attach your wiring harness to the cable box, and you just go get, I think these are called ring clamps, and you know, you just kind of slide them on the end. I had to cut away a little bit of that and crimp them on, and that just gets a really good connection. And if at a later date you want to, you could come back and put a little silicone on these to further watertight them. Easy peasy. From there, you'll just run. These boxes come with these little kind of O-rings. They fit right there, and there's an egress, exit area for the box so wires can come in, and supposedly it makes it somewhat watertight, though I'm not sure quite how sure that is. I would suggest that after everything's said and done, you can see the top has this groove right here that fits over that. I'd probably run a little bit of silicone through that groove and around all these openings just to be sure water doesn't get in here. But the cable runs in there, and you just got these 7 lugs right here. It really doesn't matter what color goes where at this point in time. You just want to start kind of plopping them on there, and then you can match it up to its mate at a later date. So what we end up with is power coming in and power going out to the trailer. And I'm showing you all this now because once I get this mounted up underneath it, I think it will be hard to video. So each one of these colors corresponds to something like your right turn signal, your left turn signal, your brakes, your running lights, an auxiliary 12 volt, and that kind of stuff, and brakes. And I'm using those kind of washers that have like a little rubber gasket on the end so it won't back out. Now the cable itself, I've got these D-rings all over my trailer, and I did put one right up front, and that allowed me to run this through there and kind of loop it around for any excess whenever I run the short tongue or the long tongue, it'll just kind of hold it. But later on when I secure all the cables, I'll show you how I'm going to anchor this so it can't get yanked out. And let us not forget the paint. Next up, we have the side marker lights, which I'm going to be using these 2 screws right there to anchor it. I also need to put a 3rd screw in for the wire, 3rd hole in for the wires to come through. So in order to lay it out as best I can, blue tape. I always like to get it so it's a level surface. So if I reference these 2 corners right here, I pretty much can use the tape itself as a reference, meaning the straight line. Punch 2 holes right where the holes need to be. And a 3rd one to center on the hole for the wires. From there, I'm going to be placing the light right here because the wire's coming over here and I can sneak the wires to the light around this, so it'll hide the wires. And it's about midway on my trailer, and because I have this blue tape as a straight line, I can just kind of reference another straight line and get it aligned the way it should be. And mark where my holes are going to start. This is the same exact process as the box. So I'm just going to do the work and we'll come back to wire it later. And the last little bit of hardware I'm installing is this little toggle switch, which basically I'm just going to drill a hole that size so it can come through. A little screw goes on front, and basically I can turn the power from the truck to the trailer on or off right here. It has a little waterproof cap on top, and the back of it's supposedly built for boats, but I will probably put silicone around it just to be sure. But I'm putting it here for the same reason, because I can route the wires and they'll stay out of the way and less chance of being snagged if I run over anything. Also, I will be putting the on position forward so that if anything ever gets bumped, it will always be turned off and not on. So right now I just need to drill a few holes so I can get through this piece of metal, and on both back corners I don't want wires just running willy-nilly. They could get snagged on something right there. So this right here is the ground wire, and I can actually ground that out on this screw right here, so it will be totally hidden. But these two are the power wires for the running and the brakes. And what my plan to do is to drill a hole at an angle right down here, and that will get it up underneath this frame rail, which will hide all the wires. So on both sides, I also need to drill a hole right there. I'm going to do those off camera because it's getting kind of late and I can't adjust the aperture any more wider. So when we come back, just know there'll be holes for wires to run through. And once again, after all is said and done, I will fill the hole with silicone so that the wires won't rub against the frame rail. Now let's get some actual wiring. And here's my trailer. There's the box right there, and here are the wires coming into the box. I have a 12 volt for all my auxiliary power. I have running lights. I have a left turn signal and brake light. I have a right turn signal and brake light. I have a ground, and I have a reverse lights, which my trailer is not using, so I'm just not going to hook anything to that one. And then finally, I have the electric brakes, and I need to get those all out. There are a lot of wiring diagrams out on the internet if you want to go look one up. This is what I'm going to do. I've told you earlier that in the box, I'm going to be connecting up 2 wires to each one of those pins. That way I can run wires down this side of my trailer and then down this side of my trailer. And it's going to be really simple. The running lights have to make it all the way back down, and I also have some running lights on either side. So those are going to be connected there, then run back down to the back corners. The left turn signal, I'll run that wire here. The right turn signal, I'll run that right wire there, unless I got those backwards, which I did. And then the ground, I'm going to run from the box. I'm just going to screw it into the trailer. These lights will be screwed in the trailer as I showed you earlier. So the trailer itself will become the ground wire. Now the brakes I am going to run down the left-hand side because that seems to be traditional. And then I have a wire running through the axle, and that way I can connect those 2 sides. So to help me out with all this, I'm going to be using a lot of blue tape. Now, if I was smart and had a little bit more money, I would have bought wires color coordinated to those blocks. So it would be the same color from my truck through the cable that attaches to my truck all the way back. And that way, if I ever sold this, the wiring would make sense to anybody. But I'm broke and I didn't want to spend a lot of money. So what I did was I just bought 1 roll of black and white wire. It is what they call jacketed duplex wires. I actually have 2 wires inside a cover for protection. And that'll work out really, really nicely for the times when I'm running, the running lights and the turn signals, because I can just run 1 wire all the way back. So to measure it out, I'm just going to come to the front of the trailer, which will give me a little bit extra room, tape that down, then just walk it back and cut it off. And I'll do that one for each one of the wires I need. I mean, really, why use a tape measure when all you really have to do is lay it down to the length you want and cut it off. Make life easy for yourself. Now on the auxiliary cable, I only need one of these cables to make it back there. So I'm going to have to come back and split this to pull that one cable out. But that will give me a long other wire that I can cut up to do a lot of splicings throughout. Now, one of my big concerns is having excess wire hanging down because I could see it getting snagged and just ruining everything. So in order to create a tight wire loom, I think what I'm going to do, and I don't know if this is the way most people do it, is I'm going to start at the box, I'm going to get all that wired up, and then I'm going to work my way back, getting the wires anchored inside the loom, the split wire loop casing, and then just wire the individual components as I work my way back with their proper cable. That way at the very end, I can just cut it to the perfect size and not have any excess, meaning that the turn signals and brakes are going to be the last thing I wire up. To start that whole process, I went and cut off a little bit of this flex tubing, 1/2 inch, that comes in 7-foot sections, and you can cut it with scissors, and basically it's just split in half. What I like about this stuff is I will be able to join up 2 different sections because they've got this kind of ribbing. So you just kind of drop one inside another one and continue on. They kind of fit on top of each other, and then just wrap a little electrical tape around it to further seal it. So I can make one continuously protective tubing with this stuff just by wrapping one on top of the other as I go down. So I've got one of these into the box, and now I'm just going to hook up the individual cables for the different parts, which means I've got to split this section right here and put on the little attachers to correspond with their mating color from the trailer, from the truck. Also, having a printout of what colors are what will help out quite a bit. One thing I really like about using a box like this is I have 2 cables for my running lights because I have them running on both sides. And normally I would have to have, a 3-way splice, which is kind of ugly. But this time, all I have to do is put both of them on one post. So I actually have 3 of those little circle things, brown and 2 black on one post. And it's all going to work out nice and easy and be kind of clean setup. Also, if I screwed anything up, all I have to do is undo a nut and move the cables to where they should be, just in case I screw something up. Now, concerning the gauges of the wires, these are all 14 gauges that are going through my trailer, and it looked like all of the wires coming from the truck are 14 gauge, with the exception that the ground and the auxiliary wire look to be a lot heavier. Now, I know that 14 gauge is perfectly fine for what I'm going to be doing auxiliary-wise with my trailer, because it's just going to a battery charger, no big deal. But just to be sure with the ground, because I don't know what's going on there, I'm going to use 2 cables from one of these things to hook up to the ground, and then I'm going to connect the other side to the trailer using both of them just to double up. I don't know. I don't think that's necessary, but better safe than sorry on that one. And with all that, just make sure that all the bolts or the nuts are tight. Now it's a matter of grabbing some good quality electrical tape and working your way back through the whole thing, making sure the wires get into this split case. I've always found that every 5 or 6 inches, once you've got it set, you go ahead and wrap it, you're not going to have to really stress about it. And that's why you want some good quality electrical tape, because this is going to be somewhat permanent. I then carefully ran all the cables through that hole I drilled, making sure they didn't cut it, and that's going to be a serious danger point. So I'm going to take this wrap and just push it through. Get it to a point where I want the cables to, from the left-hand side and right-hand side to split. So I'm overlapping it, cinching it down so that the ribs interconnect, and then using my tape to lock it down. Thus combining two of these safety tubes. Now where I want one cable to exit, I'm going to do two things. Run my tape around it to lock it down. Then run the tape on the other side so that this cable cannot slide back and forth, thus cutting itself. Then I'm just really going to go back and forth, locking it in, because I do not want it to move as it comes out of the safety thing. So this one's now going to go to the other side, and I'll repeat this process to get the other wrap around, and we'll wrap both of them around it. And to secure this safety cable to make sure it doesn't move, at key spots all the way down, I bought these stainless steel with rubber gaps that I mentioned earlier, and that's going to squeeze around it and hold it to the frame. I just need to drill a hole close to what these self-tapping screws will do, wrap it around, and screw it down. Simple as that. Though on this very first one, you might also notice that I'm including those two wires that I use to ground the whole trailer out. They're going into the same one that'll anchor it to the wall, to the trailer. So right here is where the side running lights are going to be. I've drilled a hole right there, and that's going to be an attachment point for one of those flex tube holders, and it also will act as the ground for the light. So now I just need to splice this wire into the black wire inside this right here. So I'm going to create a little bit more room on this. I'm going to measure out where I need to cut in. Carefully split this so as to not cut the black and white wire on the inside. Check and verify that I didn't. Nope. And then I can just split this wire right here. Put two ends on it. I am now going to use one of these crimpers right here. So I'm going to place one of these inside it and crimp that down. Give it a tug to make sure it didn't work. So grab another one and try again. A little tug to make sure it works. Then I'm going to take the auxiliary light wire and the running light wire. I'm going to twist them together. And those are going in the other side. And give them a good crimping. Then I'm going to add a little heat to shrink up the shrink wrap. And we now have a pretty good joint. The only point is that wherever that one wire comes around, I'm going to have to wrap a whole bunch of tape around it to make sure it doesn't move any whenever it's in that split tubing, the flex tubing. Tape going around both sides of it. And then it's just a matter of attaching the ground to the screw that holds the clamp on. Voila. I'm going to do a similar thing to that switch that I put right by that light to cut my auxiliary power on and off. I'm just going to cut it. Then it's simply a matter of sliding the connector on both sides, crimping it down. Giving it a tug to make sure it's not going to come apart. Adding heat to shrink wrap it. Then continuing the process of flex tube wrapping and electrical tape and securing it until we get back to the brakes. Next up, we're going to be wiring the brakes. And let me tell you, in my research, there is nothing that's been more frustrating in this entire build than figuring out the 2 wires that operate these brakes. You would not believe the volume of videos out there from major brake manufacturers that don't really cover wiring the brakes, because I guess I just think it's common sense to everybody that has done it before, which I haven't. Now, the main thing I've gotten from pretty much all the stuff from the manufacturers is it doesn't really matter which wires you put together. Well, that kind of makes sense on that side. This is the driver's side, the left side. That's where the power is coming from the truck to activate the brakes. But the other side is just connecting up 2 wires. You have the 2 wires that come from the brakes, the positive and negative. So we have the power and the ground. And then you have a wire that the manufacturer runs through the center of the axle just to make this easy for us. And once again, there are 2 wires there. And the polarity of these don't really matter because they're just activating a magnet. So I can just connect these, one from here to one from here, and go from there. Heat shrink them so they're waterproof. And then we got the electrical tape. And mine has this little clasp that came with it so that I can secure the cables down onto the hub, onto the brake. Again, that side, easy peasy. Connect the 2 wires together and it all works out just fine. This side though, every single video I found said do the same thing, which makes no sense because you have 6 wires over here. Second, the one video that did do it, said talk about it, filmed it through this so you couldn't even see it. And then there's the aspect of grounding it. It just didn't make any sense to me. What all the diagrams are telling me is I need to run a cable, a ground wire, from the plug all the way around to everything else. But the thing is, you ground to the trailer. And in fact, that cable, you saw me when I installed it in the truck, we grounded it to the frame of the truck. And that ground goes all the way to the battery, which is then grounded to the truck. So we're not only using the frame of the truck, but they tell you to use the frame of the trailer as a ground. So why do you need the excess cable? It just didn't make sense to me. And then I found one tech guy from a wiring guy that said, yeah, you don't need that. Just ground your brakes to the trailer frame. It's all the same, and this is actually less cable, so less things could go wrong that way. So that's what I'm going to do. I also needed to figure out how to do that three-way splice, which for, electricians out there, that's easy peasy. But you saw that I was dealing with those little crimp clamps like that, which is what everyone was telling me to do. And nobody actually showed a picture of how to do that three-way splice other than the people that were doing it like you would in a house, where you would just put the three cables together, twist them together, and then put that little twist thing on top, which didn't make much sense to me in a part that's going to be vibrating a lot out in the elements. So here's what I came up with for the power side so I could splice the three-way cables together. So I had the wires that was going through the axle, and then I have the wires coming from the brakes. So I'm going to crimp those on one side, and once again, from the instructions, it doesn't really matter the polarity. And then I have my cable, the power cable, that comes from my trailer brake controller. Now these wires from the hub assembly are really small, so they don't require that much power. So I'm going to twist them together, put them in one side of the larger connector, and crimp that. Make sure they can't pull out, and I'm good to go there. Then I'll cut the power brake cable to a length so it's not going to be dangling. And as I said, it doesn't matter which side I put it on, just connect it up to one, and the other will be for the ground. And for the ground, I'm just taking a small piece of cable. I'm just happening to do white because it's opposite of the black I put in for the power. And on the opposite end, I'm just going to put a little eye hook so that I can actually screw it to the frame, thus grounding it to the frame. This seems so much easier than what the diagrams have been showing me about running this ground cable all the way up to the truck. From there, it's just doing a matter of make pretty, protecting it in the flex tubing until I get all the way back to the tail lights. And with my trailer design, that split tubing fits up underneath this frame rail to protect it so it stays out of the way, so it shouldn't be snagged. And here's where we have ended up at my rear turn signals. This right here is that extra auxiliary cable that I'm going to be using to charge a battery on the trailer. So I've just got it out of the way, zip tied until I build the teardrop. And then we have the coaxial with two cables in it, one white, one black. The black one is my running lights. That's how I've been wiring it all the way up. And the white one is for the brake light and turn signal. Well, on the sets right here, I have a ground, which I will connect right there. This is actually steel, and that's welded, so that'll be a solid ground to the frame of the trailer. And then they give you two wires, one brown, one yellow. On the other side, it is a brown and green one. And what do you know? Yellow and green, that's kind of the standard color deviation at the plug at the very front for the left and the right hand turn signals. I believe yellow is the left hand and green is the right hand. So it all works out. So I'm going to cut this cable to a proper length. Run them through the hole I drilled earlier. And you also notice I'm going to put a third black cable in here. This is something I'm just doing on the left-hand driver's side. And if you remember way back when I told you that my license plate I would eventually put on my trailer, this is going to be the running light for the light over the license plate. So I just need to pre-wire it while I'm doing all this. So these two are getting twisted together, the two blacks, the running lights. So my main running light, I will crimp that on. And then the running light on the back side, I'm going to twist together with my auxiliary one. That'll go into the other side. And if ever there's a problem on this side, I can pretty much guarantee it'll probably be this connection. And if so, I'll just go get a bigger one of these and do that same thing. This might be a bit small. Afterwards, I did a little heat shrinking and then I taped it up, and we will silicone the hole and the cables down to prevent movement later on. Now off to the other side. And with that side done, I think the smart thing to do before we go any farther was to test this puppy out. Though note that my trailer is still upside down, so the turn signals will be reversed. So, let's see. First off, running lights. The side markers are pretty bright. Both sides. Got running lights on the side. This was in the sun, but I see the LEDs lit up. And now for turn signals and brakes. I'm going to have to check the video myself to see if that's working. That should be left side, right side, and brakes. Fingers crossed. So as y'all can see in the video, I got my running lights and turn signal brake light backwards on this side, but that's an easy fix. As soon as I go to the store to buy more shrink wrap connectors. And with that fixed, I'm now just going to adjust all my drum brakes, and then I will add silicone to all those wire parts I told you about. We'll flip this over, and I'll get this on the road so I can take it down and get it titled and inspected, which kind of wants me to bring this whole thing around to a simple idea. Most things that people do are designed so that people with below average abilities can do them. So, otherwise nothing would ever get done. So, don't think that anything like this is above what you're able to do, because I'm sure you're well above average. Y'all be safe and have fun, and remember, it's always worth the effort to learn, create stuff, and share it with others.